In the face of this financial deficit, former President Trump has revived his oldest political instincts by questioning whether the first black vice president is actually black. It all started Wednesday at a conference for black journalists.
She was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she black?
She is always identified as a black woman. She went to a historically black college.
I respect either one, but she obviously doesn't, because she was Indian all the way, and then all of a sudden she made a turn and she became a black person.
And that was just the beginning. Let's discuss with NBC's Garrett Haake in Washington. Also joining us, former GOP Communications Director Tara Setmayer and Princeton University professor and MSNBC analyst Eddie Glaude. Garrett, it seems that some Republicans want Trump to now change the subject, but he keeps doubling and even tripling down. He's even reposting birther conspiracy stuff about Harris. Is it because he just can't help himself, or is this more strategic on his part?
Yeah, look, I think basically every Republican not on the Trump payroll wants him to be talking about Kamala Harris's record, the issues on which he thinks she's weakest, things like immigration and inflation. So there is an element of Trump, kind of doing what he wants to do here, which is to play the heel a little bit. He wants to go into a room like that and kind of offend people, kind of put people back in their seats a little bit, and then come back out and tell his base that he's able to take the fight to an unfriendly room. But I think broadly speaking, strategically speaking, it is not helpful. And the risk that he takes is that sometimes these moments cross over the political zeitgeist into kind of modern parlance outside of politics. Take, for example, this tweet from Simone Biles overnight, the multi gold medal winner, making a reference to the black jobs comment. This is something that came up first in the debate a little over a month ago, but was again rehashed at that NABJ conference. When Donald Trump becomes kind of a cultural player in this manner, in which he's being mocked from across the political spectrum on the sports side of things, that's not where any campaign wants to be.
Garrett Haake, thanks for bringing us the update. So Vice President Harris called the Trump comments the same old show, and she's right. Trump has a decades-long pattern of questioning people's race and identity. Here's just a sample.
You are not allowed to be a president if you're not born in this country. He may not have been born in this country.
You have people now down there searching, in Hawaii.
Absolutely. And they cannot believe what they're finding.
You led the birther movement. You sent investigators out to Hawaii to find out whether or not Obama, which you said was not born here.
Well,
and it turned out to not be true.
Well,
so
I don't know. According to you, it's not true. I don't know.
He released his birth certificate.
If you believe that, that's fine. If you look at some of the reservations that you've approved, you, sir, in your great wisdom have approved, I will tell you right now, they don't look like Indians to me, and they don't look like to Indians. Now, maybe we say politically correct or not politically correct. They don't look like Indians to me, and they don't look like Indians to Indians. And a lot of people are laughing at it, and you're telling how tough it is, how rough it is to get approved. Well, you go up to Connecticut, and you look. Now, they don't look like Indians to me, sir.
Thank God that's not the test of whether or not people have rights in this country or not, whether or not they pass your look test.
Any Jewish person that votes for Democrats hates their religion, they hate everything about Israel, and they should be ashamed of themselves.
Congressman George Miller of California, who confronted Trump in that 1993 clip, said that was the most irresponsible testimony he had heard in his 40 years in Congress. Tara, Trump launched his political career with the Obama birther conspiracy back in 2011. How do you see these new comments, the ones we heard this week, impacting the 2024 race?
Well, if we want to go further back, Trump launched his business career being sued by the Justice Department for housing discrimination against people of color in New York in the 70s. He has a consistent history of racism. His comments about the Central Park Five, his books have been written about his comments about black accountants. He doesn't want them handling his money. I mean, there's a long history here. This is not new. And the fact that he's going back and reverting to this demonstrates how threatened he is, not only by women, but by women of color. This is obviously not the tactic that his campaign advisors want him to take. I don't know what constituency that this caters to. In politics, the idea if you want to win an election, you have to add voters to your side, not lose them. And I can't imagine in the swing states, in the battleground states, where Trump is now losing in Arizona and Nevada, according to a new Bloomberg poll, and is tied with Kamala Harris now in other swing states. I don't know how this helps him in these areas, particularly with women. This is so egregious and so offensive to the 35 million Americans of mixed race, of which I am one of them, that we are back in 2024 to this despicable era of calling people and identifying them and questioning their identity and using this as somehow making us seem as though we're lesser than. How dare he? Well, he's going to have to answer for that moving forward, and I cannot imagine that this plays well for the voters he needs in battleground states.
Well, and he had been making some inroads when it came to the black vote. More broadly, guess he's done courting black voters now? I don't know. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, he reacted to all this in a new NBC News interview. Watch this.
The more his poll numbers go down, the more Donald Trump is unhinged. And he's afraid to even debate Kamala Harris. He already said he wouldn't debate. You know, she's a strong black woman. Donald Trump may not want to say that, but it's true, and everyone knows it's true. He's afraid to debate her.
Eddie, what's your take?
It's a distraction. Donald Trump, to describe Donald Trump as a racist is pretty obvious to me. He wants us to get, kind of embroiled in this kind of conversation. So let's not get distracted by Donald Trump. Understand what he's trying to do, and that is he's trying to appeal to his base. And I think, to speak to Tara's point, the strategy has always been there are more non-voting white Americans than there are on the other side, he believes, and his task is to get them to turn out. So how do you get them to turn out? You appeal to grievance, you appeal to hatreds. So that's what he does.
And that's not giving a lot of credit to white Americans.
Not at all. And then you add to that. So I don't want the campaign to be distracted. Continue to do what they're doing. But what we have to do is to show that he's confusing race and ethnicity. He just doesn't get it. I can imagine if he saw a black person come up to him and speak Spanish. What would he do? How would he interpret it, right? He wouldn't understand the fact that you could be racialized in the United States as black, but you can identify yourself as Jamaican. You could see yourself as Nigerian. You can understand yourself as Southern. I mean, there's a whole range of ways.
A lot of us have multiple identities that make up who we are.
But what he wants to do, he wants to pigeonhole. He wants to pigeonhole difference in this country. He wants to fit it within the binary of white and black so that he can then make the judgments, because he thinks white folk in this country ought to be superordinate, that they are losing ground, that they're losing their country. And that's the way he interprets immigration. That's the way he interprets voting laws. That's the way he interprets Kamala Harris's body. So we need to understand him for who he is.
So, Tara, I just want to pick up on what we heard there at the end of that Chuck Schumer clip. Do you think a debate is more or less likely after all this? Tara.
I don't think Donald Trump's ego will allow him to not debate her. This is something that he thinks that he's great at, just like he thinks he's his own best lawyer. So I'm looking forward to Donald Trump debating Kamala Harris. I think that she will use her prosecutorial skills to destroy him on the debate stage, because if his default is just to name call and to try to bully her, that is not going to play well. Let's not forget that the idea of women. Now we have a woman at the top of the ticket, and women voters are looking at this election as a life or death choice. The binary choice is democracy or Trump, and for women, it's our lives or Trump. And Kamala Harris embodies the future of this country, embodies freedom in this country now. And Donald Trump and MAGA embody regression and trying to turn things back. And by his behavior, acting like this, continuing to act like this only reinforces that choice, particularly for women in battleground states. So do I think he's going to debate her? I don't think his campaign wants her to debate him, or for him to debate her. But I don't think his ego is going to allow him to be called a coward that he is if he were not to do it.
Eddie?
Tara's right. Absolutely. But see, I'm thinking about the swing voters. Those people who are on the margins. You see that? You hear that? What are you on the margins for? What are you waiting for? Are you going to concede? Are you going to align yourself with that morally, ethically, politically? What are you waiting for? And let's be clear. Let's not give this some kind of intellectual significance. This is dumb. It's a clown show. And we need to understand it for what it is. Are we going to go back to that? Or are we going to reach for a different America? I think we need to reach for a different America.
That's right.